Hey y'all, welcome back to Twin Oaks Family Farm in rural Southeast Ohio, USA. We're doing a Saturday show and tell and share video here at our happy little home place. Welcome back. I'm Melissa, and we're starting out down here by a little flower bed that was kind of just a casual project, I guess, that we did. And didn't really have a well-defined plan for it. And then a local friend had these dahlias, the starts of these dahlias, which are tubers. So a little root system that is what's underground for the plant. And so in the case of these dahlias, she educated me that you can dig them up in the winter and overwinter them in a place where they're not going to freeze. And at that point, it's just the tuber, just the underground contained root system. And then when the weather is favorable again, you can put the tubers back out under the soil, and then eventually you have all of this greenery, and then eventually you have dahlia blooms. So I want to start off our show and tell and share featuring these dahlias in this raised bed. So it's full of these dahlia plants. They started off as those tubers. I was trying to think back some timeline for y'all. Let's see. We planted these the very end of May. We set those tubers into the ground. So this is just a raised bed out of these corner blocks and lumber. This piece of lumber actually would not have to be here. It's just sitting on top to make it just slightly taller, because we were trying to keep the dogs from jumping in and out of the raised bed, basically. So what's in there was just like native soil, which you can kind of get a sense of what the native soil looks like there at the edge of the bed. But then on top of that native soil was used chicken bedding. So that would have some chicken manure in it, and it's the pine shavings that we use in our meat bird production barn. And so there was a layer of that over the native soil, and then a layer of this planting medium that we purchased that's called Pro Mix. So then a layer of that. So the tubers were set into that. And actually, I'll tell you something that I don't want to say like it's requires viewer discretion or anything. I'm trying to adjust the camera there. I don't want to say it requires viewer discretion or anything, but little backstory. Part of the reality of raising livestock in a production agriculture poultry operation is that there is an element of flock mortality loss during production. So in other words, while you're raising the chickens from start to finish for meat production, occasionally some of them die. And that's usually from natural causes that involve like organ failure, like heart failure, or sometimes they get turned over on their back and unable to breathe at that point. And if you're not there to visually see it and physically rescue them, turning them over, sometimes that can cause the mortality, or sometimes it's just a failure to thrive, especially if it's like in the first week. There could have been circumstances actually during incubating before hatching, have to do with maybe humidity or temperature that are kind of out of the producer's control. So there can be things that cause mortality during production. So how that relates to the dahlia landscaping bed is that before we top dressed that native soil with the used pine shavings and chicken manure and the Pro Mix, before we did that, this had sat empty. And when we had some flock loss from the meat production operation, we just took those whole birds and buried them about 2 foot down in this bed. So there was probably by the time we top dressed this with soil, over time we had probably buried about 12 chickens in this bed. And so that's more or less a slow release fertilizer that's enriching the soil where the roots are growing. So that may have something to do with how well this bed has done too. So most of the time, especially if we're not raising livestock, we wouldn't have access to something like that. But it was a way when we lost some chickens that we could put them back into the soil and let that be a regenerative thing instead of just something that was a total loss for us. So at any rate, so that was kind of a background on that. But the Dahlia bed is doing excellent. So it's amazing. I was going to try to show y'all if we can get the camera to stay focused, like the size of some of these stalks coming out of the soil material. So I showed you the one that's in bloom. This is the first one that's in bloom. It's kind of a pretty lavender color. And then back here, we see lots of buds have formed. So I'm going to try to go back here and take a look at some of those. So like I said, these were, the tubers were set into the ground the end of May of 2024. This is August. What day is it in August? This is August 3rd, 2024. Isn't that pretty? So I don't know what color that one's going to be. Oh, I can't wait to see it. So there's another bud there. There's another bud. Yeah, right there. Very pretty. So here's one. That bud. Okay, so they're doing really well. So I think we'll have a little variety of colors in this Dahlia bed, but that's the timeline. So as far as putting the tubers in the ground and getting the plant growth and the foliage growth and seeing them set buds from the very end of May to the very beginning of August. So June, July, August, so about 3 months for that process. So also thought I'd show y'all a flower arrangement that we made from right here at our home place. So very simple one. We raised these sunflowers from seed here this year, and we raised these cosmos flowers from seed here, and the little stems of grass were actually in a mixed planter that I had from the spring, and we raised a butterfly bush here, and these came from a little hydrangea bush. So the design element in there was kind of just contrast of warm colors and cool colors, and having mostly odd numbers of each type of bloom in there, and then just trying to have kind of a backdrop that has some spike to it, spike shape to it, and then a cluster of those cosmos in the center surrounded by the sunflowers. So, and like the contrast with that teal color vase. But you can arrange flowers however you want, and it's something that's a creative outlet. So there's not one correct way to do it. And if you have any kind of flowers blooming around your home place, you can probably grab a small vase, even maybe a small drinking glass, or repurpose a jar that you've emptied in your kitchen, and you can make a bright and cheerful arrangement, probably out of flowers you might have growing right around you. So just wanted to show y'all that as well. So the dahlias are doing great. So I can't wait to see more of these in bloom, and we'll update you on what colors we end up with. But so I'll have to check in with my friend who shared the dahlia tubers with us and find out what special care I need to give them as we get into the cooler parts of the year and after they bloom. But I am under the impression that it's going to be necessary to dig the tubers up and at some point and protect them some way, and then we'll be able to use them again. And so since I've never done it before, I'm curious, you know, will there be additional tubers then, and you split those apart? So I'll be learning. So this was a little bed that ended up being total volunteer this year. We had planted some veggies in it last year, and then in the fall and in the spring when there was nothing in it, we had ended up throwing some food scraps in there. And this is not really a plant that we would want in there, so whoop, So that's why you don't pull them, just trying to jerk them out of the ground. I'll have to come back and make sure I get the bottom of that. But we want to get all of that to come up out of there and try to keep the weeds out of there, even though this is a volunteer bed. We cut three spaghetti squash out of here this morning, and so there's more growing over there. But the spaghetti squash for volunteers from store-bought spaghetti squash scraps we had thrown out here. And this tomato plant is a volunteer from a tomato we had raised here last year. We get a lot of dandelions. That's what's growing there. So most of the time, at least where we're trying to grow things, we try to pull those out. But see, you know, we didn't get the roots, so it's just going to grow back is what's going to happen. But anyway, it was neat to get the volunteer tomato. We haven't feasted on any tomatoes off of there yet, but there's about 4 there, a couple there, a nice large one down there. So there's another spaghetti squash right there. So we're going to need to be watching that tomato plant, and hey y'all, and getting those tomatoes off of there as they're turning ripe, because I'm sure some kind of little wildlife critter will want to help themselves. But also in our Saturday show and tell, we feature what are some other channels that we're watching. My husband, he loves Millennial Farmer, and he watches that just about daily, I would say. And it is a very interesting channel on a large farm. So Millennial Farmer is that one if you want to check it out. I love standbys. You know, I stick with the same things over and over again. I'm watching Chema's chicken coop in Germany and Cluckin Around in United States of America, Texas, and FarmerAlways from Canada, and Heimes family farms in United States of America. So if you want to check some of those out, give them some feedback on some of their videos, see some different, I guess those are all basically farmer livestock type channels, but when I get a chance to watch something, that's what I like to watch. So at any rate, so check some of them out. And what's your favorite hobby? One of my favorite hobbies is reading. I think it's a wonderful pastime. Lifelong literacy is so important, and being intentional about it is more important than ever in the digital age and all the digital technology that we have. We have to be more intentional than at any point in the past to put information in a printed form on paper, and to pick up a book or a magazine, print material, and read it. And so especially if we're around younger generations, small kids, very, very important. Share a story with them, read a book with them, enjoy a magazine article together, a newspaper article together, read aloud, encourage them to read aloud to you, read together, and encourage them, and even your teenagers and young adults, if they're in your household, encourage them to take 10 minutes, 15 minutes reading a book and put the phones away, because it's a skill set that helps us navigate through life, literacy. And so we've got to be intentional about passing that on to our young people. But we have gone through a real busy season of life, so I can relate to being busy and it kind of going off to the wayside. But I've started to get intentional again as well about a weekly trip to the local library, because I enjoy it. And I'll pick out books there and pick out magazines there, and we even pick out movies on DVD there, because we don't have TV here at our place, but we do have a DVD player, and we enjoy entertainment on the DVD player. So we can pick out DVDs there. And local libraries have so many resources for families, for adults, for kids. So check it out. A lot of summer activities too, and sometimes they have unexpected things you can check out. I think our local one, like they're right next to a set of basketball courts. I think they have basketballs they can check out. I think they have jigsaw puzzles they can check out to patrons. So, check out your own local library. They probably have their own special niche of things that they do and that they offer. But right now, some things that I'm working on reading, the Gail Alst Spice Shop Mysteries series. It's just a fun set of kind of sleuth mysteries. So there's 5 books in that set. I think the one I'm reading now is called Ginger Snapped. And the only one, I actually haven't gotten to read the first one. So I want to find it. Maybe I'll have to request it through the library. I had finished reading Cotillion Brigade by Glenn Craney. I believe the author was Glenn Craney. That was a superb book. If you enjoy American Civil War history at all, I highly recommend Cotillion Brigade by, I think it was Glenn Craney. So check into that one. And some of the other books I checked out last time I was at the library actually was recipe books. I'm looking for some inspiration on the recipes. So we are going to feature the meat chicks in this Saturday show and tell and share. So that's what we'll actually wrap up with here. And so so as I'm standing here, this water is one of the first things I'm looking at, and I have a problem there. So I'll explain what's going on there in just a moment. But I was just out here about an hour ago, and this particular water is one of the reasons I was wanting to be back pretty quickly. I wanted to see what it was doing. But let's talk about some other things first before we get to that, okay? So if you follow our channel, one of the last times you'd have seen this flock, they were probably in a smaller space and had different materials, different feeders and waters. So you can see where these heat lamps, we've raised some of them way up. You can see where these heat lamps are hanging, and there is a short wall in the way of that right at this moment. But where those heat lamps are hanging was open space out to about where these feeders are running. And that's where we started this entire flock of Cornish rock cross meat chickens. And they weren't getting particularly crowded, but we were wanting to get them into these bigger feeders and bigger waters. And we really needed more room to utilize these resources. So we needed to reconfigure the space. The other thing, I'm stepping around them, so we're going to see some activity from them. So the other thing we wanted to be able to accomplish for these chicks is to continue to accentuate the airflow that the construction of this building is meant to utilize. So this building with these large doorways on every side of it is excellent at helping us keep the birds relatively comfortable in extreme heat, okay? These two right here, see them posturing, squaring off at each other. So these birds, what are they? 9 or 10 days old. 10 days old. Day 10 of our production system anyway, from the day they moved in. So these birds are on day 10, and we see that posturing behavior kind of start around day 6 or 7. So occasionally we will catch that on camera when we're recording. But the other thing I want to tell you is the other purpose of reconfiguring this space was so that we can, let me try to get this opened up here, so that we can open this set of doors. There's a concrete Georgia buggy there. Oh, and so I have to be mindful that, oh, I got into one of the cords. So I may not be able to do this while I have the camera because I'm not a tall person. Okay, so there, I got it untangled. So the point was to be, there we go, to be able, I know y'all are just getting doorway till I get it open, but the point was to be able to get these doors open without having to move a bunch of stuff. So, you know, if we have feeders, and because you can see where we had the blocks to set feeders and waters here, so those are in the way of that doorway opening, see there, opening and closing. So we don't want to deal with having to move a bunch of stuff every time we want to open and close this. And then I'll wait till I am done recording, because we have these latches that fasten these doors into the door frames so that if we get wind and weather, we don't have those doors really banging against the building and working on their hinges. Got all the chickens zooming this way. The sun is starting to come into that doorway more. So the birds react to that. They respond to that. They're very interactive about their environment. And even as they get older and they're less active, they're still very responsive to their environment. And that's an indicator we actually watch for, you know, how responsive and how interactive are they, because that indicates, so now they're just moving around a lot, because that indicates that the flock is healthy and that the individuals in the flock are healthy. So they're responding, so that light from the sunlight is actually shifting. We're getting more of it in that side. And those birds, their pineal gland gets triggered. All chickens, probably all birds, I'm assuming, but their pineal gland gets triggered with fluctuations in light. Okay, so back to the waters. So, okay, you can see how they're utilizing the water. So this is just the second day that they're in these large capacity feeders and waters. And I think y'all can tell in the view there that the water is in the tray. We definitely can tell right there. Okay, so the water is in the tray. So when we filled these, if you can believe it, there's 4 of them, 4 of these waters right now in here. So that's probably about 24 gallon. If you can believe it, these birds drank about 12 gallon just in like half of the daylight hours today. Okay, so we've already filled these. So they're doing really good. We want to see that water consumption. But when we filled them, this one, it did let water into the tray, but it filled it super slow. And now I see, you know, they drank whatever had filled, and now it's not filling. So if you have waters like this, and they either overflow or they stop running, don't just assume that it's broken and you got to throw it away or you can't use it. What we'll do is I'll get that water, this is full, so I'll bail that water out of it into another water. I'll get another water in here, and we'll bail that water out of this one into another one, and then we can take that apart and we can see, like, is the float stuck? Did something get down in that float mechanism and is preventing it from going down into the tray? So I think actually what we're seeing here, why are we seeing all this activity? Well, we just opened up part of that big door, and because of it, it's interacting with the dynamic of the airflow in the building, and we're getting just a little more airflow, and it's not overwhelming, and it's not disruptive, and it's not too much for the birds, but they felt that, they're responding to that. So it's actually a good thing. We want really good air exchange in our poultry buildings so that we don't have a buildup of ammonia fumes, and so that we don't have a buildup of odor and a buildup of dust. We want all that stuff to be able to dissipate and the air to kind of carry the bad stuff out and let fresh air in. So that's a good thing. So they respond to that though, okay? But there's 429 birds now. We did lose one this morning. So it's probably sometime overnight. We found it this morning. And I mentioned when we were down at the Dahlia Bed, having previously treated that bed as a chicken burial place when we had some flock loss over time during 2023, and we see it as a slow release fertilizer that's going to improve the soil. So the dead chicken here this morning, I used it in another flower bed and buried it in a hole there where we'll, you know, be planting things there, so it'll regenerate into the soil there. But these birds are doing really well. We started with 433, we're at 429 on day 10, so that's okay. So we'll get to go to about day 35 with this flock, and then they're going to the processor. So we have to keep working at getting them to consume their feed. We have to make sure that we monitor and troubleshoot issues like this and keep water in here to them so that they're drinking water. And we'll work at keeping the temperature right. What's our temperature reference point for birds at about day 10? Well, you know, when we start them, they want ambient temperature of about 95 degrees Fahrenheit. A week in, day 7, they wanted about 90. 2 weeks in, day 14, they wanted about 85. So we would presume that these birds will be comfortable, most comfortable, around 85 degrees Fahrenheit, okay? So anywhere in that range. And if it's much cooler than 85, they're going to be on the cool side. If it's hotter than 85, they're going to show panting and a little bit of signs of heat stress, okay? This flock looks comfortable, and they're moving because there is air moving, but I'm okay with that because one of the things we do want to see going on with our meat birds, and I'm walking behind them, that's where we're getting this activity, but one of the things we definitely want to see going on with our meat birds is that we do keep them somewhat active. Not active to the point that they're burning their calories off and burning the feed off, because the calories that go in, we want the chick's body to convert all of that to growth, whatever stage of growth they're in. But we do want them to bear weight on their legs frequently as they grow, even if it's just standing at the waters, or if it's moving across the pen, or if it's moving from the water to the feeder, or from their resting position to the water. But we want to see them bearing weight on their legs, and bearing weight on their legs rather often throughout the day, because that keeps their legs strong. And we got to get these birds out to the end of production, and there's only one set of legs. And if any of y'all know horses, you know the saying, no hoof, no horse. And I can tell you, with meat chickens, we got a saying too. There's no leg, no chicken. You got to have legs underneath them to get them to finish, because if their legs give out on them and they become immobile, if they don't have a helper who's going to intervene for them and either bring food and water to them or take them to food and water, they're going to malnourish and dehydrate simply from not having the mobility to get to food and water. So very, very important to, at least if you're raising meat birds, to at least have some kind of routine where you're helping your flock keep their legs strong. Some kind of management practices where you're helping your flock keep their legs strong, because that one set of legs has to get them from chick size to finish size. So it has to stay strong throughout production. So thanks y'all for joining us. Have a great week. God bless you.